I'm talking with Martyn Iles from the Human Rights Law Alliance about, well, look, one word that we said a lot in the last segment. If you haven't watched the previous videos, this is the fourth one. Go watch the first three. But we're going to get straight into neo-Marxism, which you said a few times in the last segment. And I'm aware there's a lot of people who have no idea that Marxism progressed anywhere in the world after Stalin died.
Well, it did. So essentially, when people talk about cultural Marxism and talk about neo-Marxism, they are talking about a rebirth of many of the ideals that underpinned Marxism the first time around, which of course was discredited, which caused 120 million, I think some estimates say, deaths, and economically was discredited. But what's happened is through the postmodernists, Marxism has taken on a slightly different flavour, where it's no longer just about economic disempowerment. It used to be, the working class and the bourgeoisie. It used to be about, owning the means of production and economic disempowered and empowered. That's changed. What they've done is they've actually diversified all of those spectrums. In fact, the economic situation is not so significantly emphasised anymore. It's become all these other spectrums.
Well, it's because they saw capitalism worked. They were never going to get an uprising.
That was the
worker.
problem, particularly in the 50s, 60s. Capitalism got away, and
it did really good for America. They did well.
Exactly. I mean, it's what the Western societies went after, and it wasn't going to change in a hurry. But of course, now you've got all these other spectrums on which you can get this powered, disempowered sort of relationship, which are those ones of gender identity, race. Disability, sexual identity.
So the reality is they don't want us to solve racism or other kinds of actual bigotry, not the exaggerated ones. And so they have to exaggerate it, because if there was equality, they would have no useful idiots to leverage into this uprising and implementation of this agenda.
Well, that might. I mean, I don't think that substantive equality in the way that the neo-Marxists desire it is ever going to happen. And even if it did happen, I'm not sure that they would notice it because they're so sold out to this idea of powered, disempowered. The cultural. Look, the fact is the neo-Marxists.
Well, like we said in the last segment, they'll have to invent unempowered left-handed
there'll be
people.
More classes, exactly.
Unempowered short people.
And then you'll have to try and nip this, these false ideas that create inequality in the bud. So you'll have to go to the level of, the home. Then you'll have to go to the level of the thought. And that all sounds very radical, but that is just the necessary outcome of this if it continues. And it surely will continue because it is completely infected our education system.
I was about to ask you about that, the education system. We've seen one famous Marxist implementing curriculum for all of Australia, which will be a consequence of redefining marriage, and that's the Safe Schools curriculum, now rebadged, rebranded, and very slightly adjusted into the Respectful Relationships curriculum.
That's right. Well, Respectful Relationships
which is
another
lovely packaging,
program.
Isn't it?
Oh, sure. But what Respectful Relationships essentially does is it says that masculinity is oppression. And so it actually targets boys in particular, and it says that their, boy behaviours are actually instruments of inequality, and that traditional masculinity needs to be destroyed and undermined. That's a lot of rubbish. Traditional masculinity can be a great good if boys are virtuous and taught how to be men. But of course, the idea of virtue and human improvement really doesn't come into this worldview. It's just all about, no, you're an exponent of your tribe, you little white bigot, and you're going to have to be retrained. And so I think parents really, really need to be very concerned about what's being taught in relation to these things. And, we know of Rose Ward. She's, why is she so unbelievably well connected in the education department in Victoria? Because it is a Marxist department. I can tell you, I have contacts with a number of teenagers through youth work that I used to do, and they're particularly in Queensland. And I often get assignments come through my Facebook Messenger at night to say, look, can you have a read of this and give me your thoughts? Can you proofread? I tell you, every single assignment I get. And I actually mean every single one. And every time I get one, in fact, I just got one last night and did some proofreading. And I thought to myself, well, will this be, you know, something that's actually about English or actually about, you know, some of the or history? You know, no, it's all about, you know, disempowered groups, marginalisation, minorities, the Western cultural hegemony, all these ideas that actually it's very hard for me, as someone who did school a long time ago and has done university, just to get my head around what on earth they're saying, because it barely makes sense. But this is pure, unadulterated, postmodern neo-Marxism in every assignment, whether it's subtle or whether it's overt. And I tell you, a lot of their teachers are Marxists. And, you know, I was saying before how that, and certainly the departments are Marxist. I mean, why do you think that edict comes out about not talking about Jesus in the playground in Queensland? I mean, these people have completely drunk the Kool-Aid on this ideology. And I was saying before, for the sake of the viewers, that, you know, I understand we're not all Marxists, and I understand a lot of people have no idea what it even is. And, you know, they just got sort of a bit of one idea in their head and a bit of another idea in their head, and it all sort of creates this soup which leans you one way or another. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of people in the education department of our nation who are actually Marxists.
And here's the problem, is there is not the revulsion and stigma attached to Marxism that there is to Nazism.
Oh, correct.
Call someone a Marxist,
right.
They're like, yeah, I might be. Call someone a Nazi, and you've insulted them terribly.
Yes.
But they had exactly the same DNA.
Well, they certainly had equally horrific outcomes.
I think Marxism had a much higher body count.
That's right, a higher body count as a result of Marxism.
Pure totalitarian dictatorships. They both seized private property, and they both erased the freedom and the power of the individual, replaced it with the power of the state and the collective, and marched through freedom and had a massive death toll into the 120 million under Marxism. This is a pernicious, evil ideology, and we shouldn't allow one iota of it into our education system.
Look, the fact that we have, you know, a centre-right federal government right now who doesn't have the moral fibre or the conviction to move against this is one of the most concerning things.
It's horrifying.
It's absolutely horrifying. And the fact that they had ministers who had direct responsibility for an education department which was busy implementing and funding the Safe Schools program, and which has been busy stewarding a curriculum which is just flagrant postmodernism from start to finish, and they have done nothing. I mean, it tells me that they're not centre-right.
Yeah.
I don't know what they believe, or if they believe anything beyond, maybe free markets. Maybe they're just economic guys, and they don't have the moral frameworks to deal with bad ideas, which are going to be more destructive in the long term. I'm telling you, millennials, of which I'm a member, are going to bring in Marxism socially into this nation. It's going to happen, and
our freedom has become our own opiate. We're actually so keen on protecting somebody's freedom that we're allowing pernicious, evil ideas to have free rein. And now we've created an offence to disagree with a bad idea. And so the bad ideas are using our freedom to exploit us and hurt us.
It's also complacency, isn't it? I mean, a lot of these things have come in slowly. Certainly various equal opportunity type commissions have started to balloon beyond their proper jurisdictional limits. Our institutions like universities and so forth have started to become more and more radical, and there's a real complacency about what's going on, and I think that's a real problem, and it's leading to places. Well, it will lead to places that are really, really problematic and not good. So, look, it's concerning, and I think the sooner we understand this and address it, the better. But
so, what kind of examples can you give us of how this might impact us in the future if it's not impacting us already?
Well, I think one of the advantages of being an Australian is that we're always behind the curve. Australians are socially slow. We adopt technology quickly. We adopt social change very slowly. Now that enables countries like Canada, which are socially on the opposite end of the spectrum, to be forerunners and to adopt some radical things before we get there.
Yep.
Now, places like Canada, places like Western Europe, they're ahead of the curve, and some of these issues are much more developed there. Some people will have seen news, for example, in Canada around this law over there that opens the doors. Now, as with all of these laws, it's subjective, it's fuzzy, it doesn't say it in so many words, but it opens the doors well and truly to anyone with a legal mind who reads it, to the state confiscating children when their parents do not affirm their chosen gender identity.
So if a kid is suffering gender dysphoria,
yes,
born a boy, obviously biologically a boy,
yes,
but feels like a girl,
yes,
the parent has to affirm and cooperate with that person's pathology, or it will be called child abuse, and they will risk losing their children being confiscated by the government.
Look, essentially, yes. So, I mean, and this could potentially be an issue in Australia as well, because a kid can go to school. And at school can suddenly, show a preference for girly things as a boy. And then, the school counsellor might suddenly get involved.
Actually, I know of a case in Queensland where that has happened, where the school sent home a letter about a child.
That's right.
And used the wrong pronoun.
Your child's Samantha or something, and it's actually Henry. And the parents are going, what's going on here?
Now, this child, believe this, already had a psychologist for behavioural disorders, unrelated to gender dysphoria, but might have been ADHD or Asperger's or something like that. They had a psychologist, and without consulting the parents, without consulting the child's, psychologist, the school counsellor and the school administration decided to affirm this child's different pronoun, wanting to be a she instead of a he, and even started corresponding to the parents, calling this child something that they weren't, having arbitrarily made up their mind that this boy was a girl or this girl was a boy.
And when this becomes something...
That's not just Canada.
No, that's emerging slowly.
That's Queensland, the conservative
in the old case
state.
Here. Yeah, but when you've got the actual, the actual family law legislation starting to reflect this, where this has actually become something that is reportable. The school should report this to the authorities to say, look, they've got an unaffirming parent. Now, how's this all related to neo-Marxism? It's because gender identity is one of those empowerment spectrums. And so you have a kid who's way down the bottom who's disempowered, right? Because the kid is starting to feel subjectively at the tender age of, 8, 9, whatever it is, that maybe they're a girl. Nothing new in that, actually. It's gone on, it's happened before. And then you've got parents who are saying, do you know what, we want to deal with that a certain way. We want to say, look, how about you don't wear a dress at school? How about we just wait and see, and then 80-odd%, 90-odd% of these kids just snap out of it. But no, that's oppression, because these heteronormative, perhaps religious bigot parents are oppressing this highly intersectional young person. So even at the cost of family, the state now gets involved to save that kid. That's how it's related, and it's all power, and it's all via the mechanism of the government.
Look, take a minute or two and wrap it up for us. What should the viewers be doing now? What should we be doing to actually respond to this? I hope you're going to say, for a start, vote against redefining marriage. But anything else that you can think of, we do need to wrap it up.
Yeah, sure. Look, I think that building your awareness of these issues is really important. Because the first problem is that people don't have the vocabulary to engage with it.
Yeah.
And certainly when bad ideas come along, or when confused people come along, confusion begets confusion very often. So people start talking about, as a conservative or as a Christian or as a whatever, you might vote yes. I mean, I say to that, rubbish. You might not vote yes. Because there's all kinds of reasons, but just in terms of what we've been talking about today, it actually is a vehicle by which this ideology can progress. The very institution of marriage is an offence. Labor came out the other day and said, this is a health issue. Why? Because the very fact that marriage exists apparently is oppression.
Dear me.
on homosexual people, and it's causing mental health issues. Now, that's insanity, but that's where we're at. We need to have the vocabulary to explain these things to our friends, to be able to understand them clearly, and to be able to take them to our politicians. And we need to vote, but we also need to make sure that the people in our lives that are all around us are clear in their articulation and understanding of the issues. I think that's the first thing, is the battle of the idea.
Yeah.
And then the rest can hopefully flow.
So it's not good enough to be uninformed anymore.
Not anymore. No
It's
way.
not good enough to trust our leaders, our pastors, our politicians, our other people. We have to get informed ourselves about these agendas, these subtexts, these definitions, because the war on definitions is immense.
Well, that's another one. You know, whatever it is, marriage, or if it's hate, or if it's equality,
Truth.
or if it's tolerance, or if it's truth, whatever it is,
Liberal,
all being redefined.
Elizabethan.
We've coasted along for too long.
Yeah.
You know, because now we've got an issue where we've all coasted along for ages. We've never really confronted this stuff because it's in the too hard basket. Meanwhile, kids are indoctrinated.
Yep.
Meanwhile, you've got government policy changing. Meanwhile, education departments are changing. Meanwhile, it starts to infect the church because we haven't thought about it, and we haven't been clear about these issues.
Yep.
Clarity. I mean, we're just dealing with a sea of uncertainty and lack of clarity, and it's time that people just admitted that this is what it is and confronted it.
Church and State, and basically everything I do, is designed to help you get more informed. If you'd like to become a partner with the show and help us produce the next episode, that would be really appreciated. Just head to churchandstate.com.au. But our production organisation also partners with the Human Rights Law Alliance. This work is critical in defending the basic freedoms of Western democracy. We're allowed to think what we want and say what we're thinking, in cooperation with the civil society. So if you have the ability to partner with the Human Rights Law Alliance, or just want to find out more about the work and the cases that they've been doing, head to hrla.org.au and become a partner of them as well, because they're doing critical work for the future of Australian freedom and our kids and education. And till the next episode, thanks for joining us. Thanks for watching. If you really enjoyed that video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Have a look at this great video next, and check out the website for even more interesting articles and episodes later.